Hey everybody, welcome back to the arena. I'm MD, joined by Kobe. This is episode 12. Before we get into our conversation and our lovely guest, want to shout out and show appreciation to those that continue to follow us and listen to our content. Without further ado, though, go ahead, Kobe, introduce your guest.
What's going on, guys? Another episode here, episode 12. Again, thank you all for listening. It means the world. Without further ado, we've got another guest here. This is Glenn Sevier.
Yep, Sevier.
Glenn
Yes,
Sevier.
Yep, Sevier.
Glenn Sevier. I met Glenn in improv. Funny enough, so this is our second guest now that we've had on from someone I've met in improv. But Glenn is a social worker, a licensed social worker, and also does therapy. And I've spoken to Glenn a couple times at length about kind of his job and why he got into it. And I think it's a really cool story. And so really excited for you all to listen and to kind of share this conversation. So without further ado, Glenn, why don't you just provide a background on yourself and kind of like how you got to where you are today?
Okay. Well, first of all, I want to thank you all for inviting me. MD, thank you for inviting me. Kobe, thank you. We've had some interesting and fun time in the improv.
Sure have.
And it has really been extremely hopeful for me. And I say that because, this is my 30th year in the area of counseling. And, I started my years off as a case manager, actually, back in the 90s, shortly after graduating from college. And then I did that for a while, working with individuals that were wards of the state, DCFS wards of the state here in Chicago. And so those were some very powerful, interesting years to learn a lot from these individuals that were experiencing a lot of different concerns that were really out of their control, especially being youth. And so I did that for 11 years, and then I made my way in two things I was doing. First, I made my way into the schools as a school social worker. And I did that for up until now. And at the same time, I started my private practice. And in both areas, I worked those simultaneously. So during the day, I'm a school social worker. And during the evenings, I'm a licensed clinical social worker / psychotherapist.
So how do you, how do you uncharge? So you're a social worker during the day. Mm-hmm. And then you see patients for therapy at night. Mm-hmm. Does that weigh on you? How are you able to kind of uncharge from the very, I'm sure, real conversations that you're having?
Yeah, very interesting question. I just love what I do. And it's interesting because my wife and I, we have, 2 kids. And to have all those things going on at the same time, I couldn't tell you how we did it, but it really worked. And I think having children keeps you grounded. That was a huge factor. Now they're 21 and 22, so it's a little bit different. But during those times, in between a client, I may have an hour where I'll pick them up from their tumbling practice and bring them home, and then stop by Chipotle and get their food and have it ready. And I say, okay, girls. Dad's got to go back down because we have our private practice, and I say we. My wife, she's also a clinical psychologist.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So that really works hand in hand.
So you said you love what you do. Mm-hmm. What's the origin story? At what point did you know this is what I want to do? And take us through why.
Yeah, well, man, that goes all the way back. Really to childhood, if I can be honest with you guys.
Please.
Please. Yeah. Well, for me, I was always into things like my mom and dad always had me, volunteering and Boy Scouts and all those things. And for me, that was really, that was cool. But I think the thing that really sparked my interest in helping people, other than being in those, various arenas, was just for my own personal story. My own personal story was based around, I was a major stutterer as a kid. Horrible. And so much to where I couldn't even say my name. I couldn't say the Glenn. Something about the gluh really was difficult, extremely difficult. And so I just found myself in these arenas, whether it be at school, whether it be at home, the playground, I was just a major stutterer. And so growing up and having those kind of experiences like that and being in very vulnerable situations, whether it be in school or wherever, it was really, really difficult. And once I was able to kind of get an understanding of it, which took me through a lot of trials and tribulations, I think by my 8th grade year, I was able to finally come with the understanding of how do I want to present myself. And through that, I was able to, conquer the stuttering, which means that you conquer it by saying, I don't give a damn anymore, and I think that was the thing that created anxiety, even mild depression, just not knowing how to communicate, not even communicating. There would be times where I would not speak to anyone, especially in the summertime when no one knew me when we were traveling. I just didn't talk.
So how did you get to that point where you said, I don't give a damn? Like what led to that? Because
also,
that's in 8th grade.
Yeah.
That's a pretty. You have to be very mature at that age to say, like, I don't give a damn what these people think or how I present. Like, I'm going to be myself.
And did somebody help you get there?
Yeah. I had a couple of people at my church. They were very dedicated and wanted to see me do better, actually sound better. But it was just really, really difficult. And I was always trying to not stutter for these people. I was making sure that I wanted to be the right person and say the right things. And being in church, you have to say the various verses and Bible verses. And sometimes we had to go to the congregation where we had to speak in front of everyone else, like on Easter or Christmas, and everyone had the verse to say. And, you had this old school silver microphone standing in front of you. And you had the whole 500 people in the congregation looking at you, and I couldn't even get the first word out. And it's just like if I said something, you can see the snickers. I could feel the snickers. So it was just really, really unbelievable. But I got to that point was because, and this was a very vulnerable time for me. It was I just shut down the school, and having to repeat a grade over again was the most humiliating thing I ever had to experience. And a stutterer. So there I was stuttering, which people would say now, had a speech impediment, but I call it stuttering because I like to get power from that. And still being in the same grade.
It's quite a transformation to go from there to taking improv classes. Now I know that's however many years later, but I stuttered in. I think everyone stutters in improv because you're right off the top. So I think that's quite a transformation.
You mentioned humiliation, and I hear that that's one of the most dangerous feelings, and one of the worst feelings. And it sounds like growing up with a stuttering problem, some instances of having to repeat a grade, a lot of humiliation probably is you probably have a very well-known relationship with humiliation. Like, what can you impart on us about humiliation from your perspective?
Yeah, along with that humiliation came a lot of shame and guilt too, because I was the oldest, and being the oldest of 6 of us, I have 5 younger siblings. I really had to bring a lot of expectation. So I just think that humiliation, I really began to use it as opportunity. I began to use it as a sense of empowerment because I had gone through that in grade school and just how that felt. I just knew that something needed to happen. I started meditating. A gentleman at school, at my church told me about meditation and slowing down my breathing and focusing on my breathing and nothing else. And so he showed me and told me some techniques. It took me about a year or two to kind of get it down, but my whole change in my conversation, it was definitely helpful. So the way I talk now, real nice and slow and smooth, that's the way I had to present myself, because I knew if I talked any faster, it was going to be over.
I understand that because I will stutter occasionally, and it's because I'm thinking, like, I got so much running through my head that I want to get out that I think if I could benefit from just taking a step back too. And I've actually started meditating as well, not for that reason, but I think I think there's so many other benefits to meditation, that one being something I'd never thought of, but just focusing on your breath and kind of not feeling the need to speak so quickly.
Yeah.
And you learn that in improv too.
And can you imagine being so? There I was in the 7th grade, and I was in the classroom, and the teachers always, like in English, they say, "Okay, you all, we're going to read, this chapter. Everyone has their paragraph, so make sure that you read it and read it out loud and clear, so everyone can understand it. And we're going to have a quiz at the end of this reading." And so I'm looking in my class, and there's 30 of us, and I'm in the middle, so I'm about 15, 17, and so I'm counting all the paragraphs, going step by step. Okay, this is my paragraph. Probably have about 8 sentences in there. And so, but I'm so fixated. I'm just perseverating on my words and making sure
you're not listening to
I'm not listening to anything else. Everyone else is
totally in your head.
And I can just see it just going from one person to the next, from one aisle to the next. And it's getting to me. I have about 3 people left before I speak. And I just, I happen to look up and I'm looking around, and I'm looking at all the guys in the classroom. And they're looking at me, and I'm looking at them. And they're nodding their head, and they're like, it's about, it's like a Kevin Hart, it's about to go down. And I'm just like, I'm a good reader. My mom was a reading teacher.
So are people were you bullied for this? Are people waiting to just burst out laughing?
Laughing.
Easy, right?
Yeah, they just couldn't wait. Like I said, it was a Kevin Hart type concert going on. As soon as I speak, everyone was, because I had done it all my life, and the other kids, students knew that, and so got to me. Like I said, I knew all the words. I was a really good reader. But when it got to me, and I couldn't even get the first letter, not the first syllable, the first letter out, and it just sounded like a machine gun. And kids, they held their stomach, they were smacking each other on the back, it was just uncontrollable. And this happened all of the time, daily, weekly. And so you kind of get an idea of how you want to handle those situations, right? So I was a pretty good athlete, played baseball and basketball, and so whenever class was over with and we were going out to the playground, I was always the first one to be picked. So that self-esteem in that area was really good. But in the classroom area, and from these 2 guys, I won't forget it, Bradley and Randall, these were the 2 ringleaders that was just couldn't stop laughing, And I always had those guys in line because Brady had really nasty teeth, and so I would talk about him. Randall never combed his hair, so I could talk about them. But when they had that whole class, and when the whole class started to laugh, and a lot of times you kind of prompt yourself to look at the teachers to say, okay, can you help me out a little bit? And this particular time, I looked at her, and she was laughing, and that's what really just talking about humiliation. Shame about my inability to be able to speak in the classroom, thinking about my siblings and just how they may feel, finding out that their brother's a stutterer and so on and so forth. I just really shut down, and that was my reason for really having to repeat that class, was because I just, for that rest of the year, I just totally shut down. I know my mom tried to see about counseling, even a psychiatrist, to see what kind of medications there were.
Did you do any of that?
I tried, but it didn't work because I didn't like swallowing.
So
No,
help
I
me
get
understand,
that.
what worked, right? It's meditation, it's not giving a damn, it's somebody in the church introducing you to some of these techniques. What for you, is it just those 3? What ultimately propelled you to...
I think the thing that propelled me was during my 8th grade year, my mom, she wound up transferring me to another school. And that was extremely helpful. A fresh start. No one knew me. And I didn't go into school that next year having these feelings of just overwhelm, feelings of just frustration and not being able to connect. I knew I was an athlete. I knew I had that. But going in throughout that summer, I really practiced on speaking. I really practiced on taking my time, and that's what really, really helped.
And it's pretty cool now to see that you're now a therapist and a social worker, which is the epitome of being a good listener. And I think for my therapy, I'm doing 80% of the talking probably. And so I think it's really cool that you're able to then now do something that maybe doesn't require you necessarily to speak all the time. Like you all you have to do is, I mean, well, among other things, but is listen and listen to what people are saying and be present. I think it's very interesting.
Yeah. Well, you know how that helped? It helped for me was because all of those years, because I didn't want to stutter, what was I doing? I was doing a whole hell of a lot of listening. And so my conversations would be like this. Wow. Whoa. Really?
Yeah.
And the more I said that, the more, the other individuals, my buddies, the more talking they would do.
So, and is it safe to assume too that you probably gravitated more towards trying to be on the field playing sports versus in the classroom studying? Because did you ever feel like deterred from progressing in education? And
yeah, definitely. Just because I had that stigma of just being a stutterer, and I had my mind so focused on everyone else, I really wasn't taking in the what needed.
And that's essentially like running away from the problem in some ways versus what you ended up doing was taking it head on, and what actually seems like you've solved it now.
Yeah.
And like, is that your origin story as to what led you to say, you know what, I'm passionate about how much somebody can improve, and I want to now help people because I know what it's like to maybe feel helpless or feel like I need help. And am I putting it together correctly?
Absolutely, yeah. I was experiencing a lot of anxiety, and like I said, I know I was experiencing depression because I couldn't speak. I'm in a world where we're supposed to communicate and speak, and when you speak, then people understand you, and people get a chance to know you and like you. And being in middle school, and you're kind of inquisitive with your buddies, and you want to have conversations, and you also have people that you like, and you can't do any of that. So yeah, that was really empowering for me to be able to use that, and like I said, the listening and being able to get feedback from people, it really put me in a really nice situation where I can now help others.
Yeah, why don't you talk about now your private practice, like how you got it started. I think you have a unique, which I found out in talking to you, a unique kind of model, if you will, that you employ, and kind of where that came from, because I think that story that I heard once is very cool and inspiring.
Yeah, so it is a modality that I created back in 2000, and it's called Walk and Talk Therapy. And, working in the schools, which I love, because I get the chance to put myself back in an environment where I had the most difficult time.
It's another example of people turning their biggest pain into a purpose.
Yep.
Like now you enjoy spending your time where you were ultimately struggled the most in helping people. Maybe it's not the exact same issue but dealing with something.
Yeah, dealing with anxiety, dealing with depression, and how do you work through it. So, when I started working in the high schools, my role is to work with our general ed students, general population, and also with our students that may have an IEP, which is called Individual Education Plan. And they may receive services based off of reading or other things like that. But I had students that needed to see me. They were deemed to meet with me once a week. And some may be based around emotional concerns. Some of those emotional concerns stem back from their childhood, whether it be things going on at home or the community. So I would have to see if I could speak with these students. I would either have a note given to them to have them come down to my office, or I would go upstairs to their room, the classroom, pull them out. But oftentimes, there was a note. I would give the teachers a note, but no student. These guys weren't coming down, and this was in the area in the west suburbs, and they had a lot of things going on within the community, and so with a lot of students, and there is trauma, which is reasons why some of these emotional feelings may manifest through anxiety or acting out in the classroom. They needed to come down to see me, so.
But they weren't coming.
So for the first few months, no students were coming. So I would have to go to the classroom. I would have to catch them in the lunchroom or catch them after school. And I would say, "Hey, man, why come you're not coming down?" what's the deal? You're not coming out to see me? I just only want to speak to you maybe for like, 30 minutes to 45 minutes. And they're like, no, I'm not coming down there. You crazy? What are we going to talk about? I'm not sharing anything with you. So it's not even worth it. Everything's cool with my family. Everything's cool with me. And we don't need to have any more conversation. That was that was the conversations that we would have. Very sharp. And, some of these guys were, part of, as we call gangs or affiliations. And, for them to be seen with me as social workers, especially back in the early, 2000s to mid 2000s, wasn't going to happen. So I had to come up with a strategy to, engage and meet the needs of what the requirements were for me, and also definitely trying to find ways of meeting them so we can look at some of the concerns that we can kind of work through. So I did that. I came up with an idea. So when I would go get them out of class, I'd say, you know what? We don't have to go back down to my office, man. We can just walk the halls. Everyone else is in class. The hallways are totally clear, except for some of your friends that you would cut class with. But other than that, we can just really hang out and have a conversation. Make it very informal. Something about walking side by side, shoulder to shoulder, elbow to elbow, and just walking straight and not having to always look face to face. Being in my office, which could be considered to them to be, I'm in trouble because I'm going to somebody's office. It's a sterile environment, brown walls, wooden chairs. I'm sure they've experienced those things before, and it wasn't nice. So to have them in, to allow them to have control over the environment by walking into places that they feel comfortable, going up some flight of stairs to raise the heart rate up, which in a lot of ways that's really helpful, because when you raise your heart rate, it also ignites dopamine to be released from the brain, which is feel good chemicals, and it's a way of just calming them down. And so we would take these walks, and it was really a total different experience.
So you then employ that into your private practice now?
That's what I started to do. Once I realized it was extremely helpful with my students, I also had teachers who were adults. Well, obviously they're adults, but they would come and say, hey, for example, Marcus was really, you're talking to him. He really pushes my buttons. I'd like to talk to you about him. And I would say, well, why don't you meet me at the track, and we can walk around the track and we can kind of, have some conversation. And that's what really sparked me to have it in my private practice, because as we were talking about Marcus and the buttons that he would push, we were really talking about their own concerns. And the more that they talked, the more they talked about what they were dealing with and what they dealt with growing up. And I found that to be really helpful, because we had more of a conversation, understanding that when they saw Marcus, they could appreciate Marcus more, because they had a better understanding about him and about the buttons that were being pushed for them. So
you've mentioned trauma, and I want to ask you this question because you are a therapist, and you can answer it. Define trauma in your eyes, and how I think you had mentioned how it can bleed into people acting on emotion without even realizing it. Can you just talk through that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, it's very complex, but let me just try to see it as. So it's about when a person is having an experience. For me, this is what I've experienced with my clients as it relates to trauma, is they're in a situation that they have no way out. They feel like the whole situation, the experience is out of their control. And they come up with, or they have these feelings of either fight, flight, or freeze. And I would even add in another one called submit. And that submit is something that is extremely difficult, because you have no way of dealing with it. Let's say that you're in for example, an apartment, and you're on a high rise, and your apartment caught on fire, and there was no way to get out, and you can see everything burning around you. The smoke is suffocating you, and all you can do is just stick your head out the window. Everyone sees you, so the fire department is there, but it's a hell of a hard way of getting up there. And so you've gotten to the point where it's gotten so overwhelming to where you just said, I'm gonna just give up. I'm just giving up. And just as you say that, the ladder reaches your balcony, and the fireman gets you, he pulls you out, he takes you down, and you're able to get out of that situation. But then you find yourself wanting to go over visit other friends, or you may find yourself having to go to a corporate office for some reason. And something about getting in the elevator and going to anything over 5 stories, you begin to have this physical response, something deep in your gut. You start feeling your heart begin to palpitate. You begin to sweat. You begin to get real shaky. And you're like, you know what? I can't get on the elevator. This is too much. I'm not doing it. Why? I don't know why. I just don't feel like I can do it. That is the beginning, the signs of what you experienced, where you felt powerless. Those feelings and those emotions.
How can people become aware of that?
Well,
like if you've had trauma, when you're like, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, that's when the counseling comes in, and I say counseling therapy, is one and the same. But that's when it's when you say something like, well, I can't go upstairs, I can't do this, or I can't do that. If someone is aware of that, maybe they can bring it to one's attention, or maybe they're able to share with someone else and share it with the teacher, or teacher lets me know, or they call in as a private client, and we begin the process. Where did it begin? Sometimes they find ways of not dealing with this traumatic experience for years, but as they get older, some of these things begin to come up. Say that they have to take their child to the babysitter. They have to take their child to see their grandparents who happen to live on the 15th floor now. How do you process that? How do you go through that? That's one of the experiences that we can talk about to kind of work them through that.
So when you deal with trauma, when you said deal with trauma, it's like I'm aware of it. I know the event that has happened years ago. I live with it. Maybe there are, things that come up like that elevator example where that bubbles back up. Well, how do you deal with it? Because a lot of people will say, well, go to therapy or address it. But what does that actually mean? Does that mean just speaking it out? Does that mean expressing it, admitting it? Like in your eyes, like what does it mean to actually deal with a traumatic experience in your life?
Sometimes they don't, they're not aware that it even happened. It's subconscious. And going through or wanting to go through counseling, that'll be something that we kind of bring up. Because sometimes they just say, I don't know why I don't want to go upstairs on the, anything past 5 stories. I don't know why I don't want to go in the basement. I don't know why I don't want to be around a huge crowd. And we have to kind of sit back and look and find out where's that coming from. See,
how do you address it?
Yeah, like once you figure out where it came from.
So it's a matter of, and I say that loosely, it's a matter of it's being able to acknowledge where is that particular experience coming from. And, if it's been 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, we can begin to look at it from a different vantage point. You at the age of now, if you're 25, now you can look at it back at the age of whatever, 20 or 18. And you can begin to look at it from a different perspective. You're a little bit older now. You're a little bit more mature now. And we don't have to actually live that experience. We can talk about it, but you don't have to live it because it's past. And I think, it's about establishing a relationship with the client that I'm with, making sure that they know that what we talk about, it's going to be very vulnerable. It's going to be very hard. But to have that kind of established relationship, I think is very helpful. It's not going to happen overnight. Sometimes we may have to go to that actual place, or we may have to talk about it in a real time, and that's more through meditation. But we can pull ourselves out to say, that's what it felt like. But now, what do we want to do about it? Techniques, strategies that we talk about, those are very helpful.
What do you say to someone, or what do you say to the audience for people that struggle to be vulnerable, that struggle to be open? Like, what advice would you give those people?
I'll even add another angle to that. The idea of like being stoic, right? This idea of like, I'm going to just leave it there, understand what had happened, but I'm just going to leave it there.
Well, I mean, people do leave it there for quite some time. And I think it just has to come to the forefront that they realize leaving it there isn't working anymore.
Yeah, I think you have to let it go.
Yeah, I think in some cases it's been a motivator for them, and it's worked for them to move forward and not to get caught up again. But at some point, it begins just to catch up. You can no longer use that same move as a sports analogy. You have to change it up because now it's really being detrimental.
Yeah, no, that's a great point because we had actually a guest on recently, and he was talking about his experience with therapy, and he was saying how he used to not go, but he was kind of dancing around the idea. Like he would do yoga, he would meditate, he would cold plunge, he would do all these things that he thought was kind of an escape or doing things but he wasn't actually addressing what needed to be addressed, and eventually that quote unquote caught up to him.
Yeah, I've worked with a lot of athletes, even former athletes, pro athletes, and it's just amazing what they've been able to do with some of the experiences that they've had to go through, and the trauma that they have now worked through, but they've always just got away from. So, they can be an excellent basketball player. Why? Because they've spent most of their time at the court. Why? It's because they don't want to be at home. Why? Because they may not want to be in the same neighborhood. So they find ways of looking at these areas. I used to love really lifting weights, and I used to always go in doing the same old thing. I run right to the bench, and there's other things I know I was supposed to work on, cardio and the arms and the squats, but I just worked on one thing because that's what worked for me. But after a while, you realize that there's other aspects of your life that needs to be worked on. And I think I use sports in a lot of ways for them to have a better idea. You can't keep running the same play over and over again, especially when the big man down low is now smacking your shit out into the stands. What are you going to do? You're going to keep going to the right? Or if you don't have a left hand because you never worked on it, you're going to have to really begin to work on it. And you have to have
Isn't that what insanity is? Doing the same thing over and over again but expecting a different result?
Absolutely. And it's worked for so long, but after a while, when your coach identifies it, even when the people in the stand says, he has no left, you've got to be able to trust someone, a coach, who could be a counselor, to help them process where do we begin. We have to start from the basics.
So what do you say to people, I guess going back to my original question, that struggle with vulnerability?
Yeah.
Like that struggle with the ability to open up, that maybe they want to. The idea sounds maybe scary, but freeing. Like what do you say to those people?
I think if they're finding that they're getting to a point in life where whatever they do is not helpful, when they wake up and they still have that same feeling of this is just not working, sadness, incomplete, worn out, that they have to want to learn to do something different. And I think if they can find someone that they feel comfortable with, I think that it would definitely be helpful. The clients I have, they come to me because they choose to, and that's more than half the battle. But if an individual that still is kind of like, I don't know if I want to do this, and they're finding that, their coping strategy is getting down to playing video games all day long, or smoking all day long, or having to go out and have some drinks to help them calm down, things like that. It can be anything, anything that you do excessively, and you're realizing that it started out because you were trying to cope with something else, and now this is all you're doing. I think they have to look at that. It's not about judgment. That's what I tell all my clients, individuals I come into. It's about really finding out the best way that's going to work for you.
So we talked about trauma, humiliation, depression, anxiety. On the other side of that spectrum is perhaps happiness, joy, peace. We've talked about happiness a few times in several conversations. I'm just curious your thoughts on what is happiness to you? I know the pursuit of happiness is a very hot topic, and I view it as more of a state of emotion or in the moment versus a state of being. I'm just curious, what are your thoughts on what happiness is and the idea of the pursuit of it?
Yeah, I think happiness is happy. That's just one emotion. I mean, there's so many emotions other than just being happy. I think that's the main thing I like for people to understand is that just because you're happy just because you're not happy doesn't mean that you can't get things accomplished. I think happy is the byproduct of something that you've been able to achieve. And because of that, You feel happy, but it doesn't last that long. Happiness may last a few minutes, may last a few seconds, but then what do you do thereafter? And I think that we need to have a thermometer, emotional thermometer, to say, even when things aren't happy, am I still getting things done? Are things still being completed? Are things still being observed and taken care of? Because there's more than a couple of hundred emotions that we go through. And for me, growing up, I only had three. I had frustrated, angry, and meh. And that was it.
So is that your North Star? Is it like getting stuff done? Like that's what you should be striving to do. That's what you should be focused on doing versus you should be focused on achieving happiness or generating happiness or feeling happy. Is it more important to you that, hey, so long as you're getting stuff done, sure, let happiness ebb and flow?
I feel like it's a sense of like direction, a sense of, I think of like a sense of inner peace almost, in a sense of purpose, like getting to the point of getting things done, but getting things done that you care about, getting things done that matter to you. Like that's kind of what I think about when I think to answer that question. But you go ahead, you're the therapist.
Well, I think, what have you done in your life that has really been tough? Let me just put a little bit lighter. Let's say if you're working out and you finally get to that plateau that you've really been wanting to work out at, like bench press 225 pounds. You didn't get to that point, 225 pounds bench press by being happy, right? But that particular day that you happen to bench press that 225, and after you put it back on the rack, there will be a feeling of happiness. But will it last for the whole entire day? No. I mean, yeah, you can definitely talk to people about it. You can even brag about it. But guess what? That next day, that next week, you're going to have to be back grinding again to be able to maintain that and anything else higher than that. And you're not going to be walking around feeling happy. It's going to be focused. It's going to be determined. It's going to be, what are the short-term goals I need to do in order to make these things happen? So if it's eating healthy, if it's exercising, whatever those things are, I just think happiness is just one emotion. I don't want to, I don't like to be a Debbie Downer about that, but there's so many more emotions that are even, I feel that's even more empowering than just being happy.
Can I guess one of them? Gratitude.
Well, so I guess these can be like supplemental, right? Know your focus, drive, discipline, consistency. The list goes on. Like that's ultimately what drove the journey to that 225 example you mentioned. But the days that you're feeling happy, probably easier to get in the gym that day, right? So is it at least supplemental? Is it at least important to think about? Making sure that, to Covey's point, am I doing things that make me happy, or can I invite happiness as a tool in that regard? Have you ever thought about it that way?
I've thought about it, but man, I've just run into so many individuals that when they're not happy, they don't do anything. And I have clients where we will, I'll give them a rating scale to go over, 3 times out of the day. So I say, okay, so morning, afternoon, evening, I want you to give me a rating between 1 and 10, 10 being the best. And, they may send, like on a Monday, oh, my average was about a 7. They may send on Tuesday, oh, my average may be a 5, and so let's say they plateau or even out at 7, okay? Now, for them, happy is being a 10, right? But I asked them, at 7, throughout the entire week, did you accomplish the things that you wanted to accomplish? Yeah, I did. Did you benefit from learning from the things that you didn't accomplish? Yeah, I did. I said, so did you have to actually be happy to have a successful and a gratitude week? And I never thought of it like that. I said, but you're looking at happiness as the ultimate, and if I didn't reach it, then it wasn't beneficial. I say it's part of the process. It's part of the process.
And I think of people a lot of times, the grass is always greener. The expectations are always, you always have expectations, or you're always thinking about stuff that you don't have instead of appreciating what you do, which kind of goes back to that whole idea of gratitude, which has helped me tremendously. I guess my question, you mentioned, young Glenn, there were three emotions: frustrated, angry,
and mad.
Which I can relate to. Like you're content, but it's, to me, I associate that with like the feeling of numbness, like just not really very just even keeled. Like,
Absolutely.
and so like my question is, Glenn then versus Glenn now, like what has changed? Like how do you feel now? Like what? Because to me, for me, what's been the biggest driver, or what I would say has been a big thing for me, has been a sense of inner peace with myself. It's not necessarily, to your point, which I've realized. I always thought that once I came to terms with myself, okay, I'd be happy, and I'm always going to be happy. And while I am, but that happiness, that feeling is fleeting. But what isn't is that sense of inner peace, and that allows me to move through life with purpose, with a direction. So my question is like, how do you feel now, or how are you able to feel those better feelings now versus then?
Yeah, I know as a kid I always wanted to feel happy, and because of just some of my experiences, definitely, with the stuttering, definitely kept me in that hole. So if I had any other experiences other than frustrated, angry, and mad, guess what? It didn't really happen. The experience didn't really connect. It just didn't go in those three slots. If it didn't go in those three slots, then it was just pushed to the side. So I never got the chance to have a full range of experiences of what I've gone through. And I think as a young adult, when I met my wife, we talked about my emotions and just why I looked so stoic, why I couldn't really express my feelings, and it's just, she really helped me understand that there's more than just a few emotions. And I see that a lot in the high schools where, especially young men, because we were told that we're not supposed to show full range of emotions, that we're supposed to be men. And I think as I've gotten older, I've definitely found and sought to connect with other words that may not be happy, that has allowed me to be able to show a full range of, like you said, contentment, gratitude, peaceful, sometimes agitated, sometimes frustrated. But there's a full range of these words that I'm using that I can now put my experiences to, rather than just those three. And that's what's helped me over my years, and especially has helped me work with my clients, especially my adult clients, because a lot of times the things that they are experiencing in their late 20s to 30s, we always kind of go back to, when was the first time you've had those experiences? And they always go back to middle school.
Yeah, I was going to say, how many issues generally stem from like childhood? Like
a lot of it goes back because they have found a way not to deal with certain aspects of their life or certain emotions that they've somehow covered over, and they've been able to successfully get to a point in their life where now it is no longer working, and now
like maybe they've reached their tangible goal, but they're still not happy, or they're still
that too, and or they have found that playing video games isn't going to be their way of making themselves happy, because they're in control of that buttons and they're in control of getting these points, and I'm happy. But after they push those things aside, they still have to deal with the real world and the real reality of, I never really looked at that.
So in some ways, it's like happiness can be a mask to solving a problem that's deeply rooted, because the moment all of a sudden that joy or stimulation goes away, you're still dealing with whatever pulls you down.
Absolutely.
So is it safe to say, or is it somewhat accurate or in agreement with you to say something along the lines of like, when somebody's depressed, it's not so much the goal to make them feel happy or get to being happy, but it's about making them not unhappy, like getting them out of just depression, getting them to maybe a state of inner peace or contentment, something maybe in between that feeling of joy and that feeling of depression.
It's about educating your clients as much as possible to help them understand that they do have a sense of power, a feeling of empowerment, to help themselves get out of this situation.
That they're able to. It is a responsibility, which is it's a harsh way of saying it, but it's reality. We've had it said here before, no one's going to come save you at the end of the day. Like, you have to be the one that. But to your point, helping them. That's where the professional comes into play. Feeling empowered, someone that probably feels powerless.
I never thought about empowerment as a feeling, like feeling empowered. I never thought of it
Is
that
that
way.
interesting? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And like maybe that's step one, right? It's like, hey, you actually have power to do something. You actually have control of something, right? Because you talked about trauma stemming from an event where you didn't have any control. You felt helpless.
Yeah, yep,
And so part of that breakthrough can be the fact that, hey, here's where you do have power and control, and guess what? It's about you and your own self and how you feel.
And some people don't even want that. Some people don't want to feel power. Some people don't want to accept that they are in control of ultimately
They don't want
their
the
lives.
responsibility.
They don't want the responsibility. I don't think. I think a lot of people that scares them. That and for me it did to an extent. For part of my life, like I didn't want to accept that. Like I could change things. It's that whole idea. I think of like playing the victim. Which is super interesting.
Super interesting sometimes. And again, guys, I don't want to just have just a one way of looking for each client, each individual. It's different, and that's a part of the process. That's a part of the journey. Going through counseling and therapy. I think that's what we really want to, kind of stay focused on. But going back to what you're saying is sometimes individuals may feel, have a feeling of power because they are the victim. Isn't that interesting? Because they have been dealt this hand and they've been able to have some type of attention, positive or negative. But people are
see it going on a lot in the world today.
And people are responding to, well, how can I help you? And if that individual hasn't focused on, okay, I am a victim in this situation, but I don't want it to continue to remain to be the victim and still have some sense of power, because how could you ever do this to me? Why this happened to me? How dare you? I think we have to begin to kind of slow things down, identify again what are the real concerns, what are the real issues, and how do we come up with a plan of action to work through those.
I gotta say, you've got two very lucky children to have mom and dad as psychologists and clinical therapists.
Yeah, well, I'm going to make sure they hear this blog, because not the blog, this podcast, because I want them to hear that from you too. Sometimes they definitely realize as they've gotten older that it's extremely helpful. And we'll see where they go with it. But the main thing is they know is that mom and dad aren't there to judge. We're here to support, and I think that's what we all need to have a understanding about, is looking for, seeking out that kind of support that that can be helpful, rather than continue to stretch things.
Glenn, one of the things we talk about often is the stigma associated with not just therapy itself, but the proper way of maybe expressing emotion, dealing with depression, being vulnerable, all of these things. Ultimately, yes, therapy joins in the conversation, is very prominent, but with men specifically. And in your experience, with an ability to speak to maybe a broader audience here at this moment, like what can you speak to on the stigma associated with it? If there's a man out here listening that is maybe caught up in that perception or that bias.
Yeah, that's always been difficult for men to be able to express a full range of emotions, because oftentimes we haven't been taught a full range of emotions.
You've been conditioned otherwise.
We've been conditioned otherwise, and even conditioned to where it's just celebrated. And so that's another great thing for me, being in the schools, in the high schools, is working with individuals to kind of help them understand that there are other ways of working through your emotions. Now, when I have a young man or a high school student or even a client, my private practice, and they seek out support, they've already realized that something's not working, and I'm finding myself coping with different things in my life in a way that's no longer working. And so I'll just say, if there's a male out there and they're realizing that something or things aren't working because they're not finding a way of getting in tune to something that I call emotions, because I think emotions are more than just a feeling. It's an action. When you feel this way, then you want to act upon that. And if it's been negative feelings and you have no way of coming up with a coping strategy, you'll act in a very destructive way. But if you have options and knowing what your feelings are, which takes time, we can come up with another plan to help them identify how do we move forward. But I find a lot of my male clients, they are ready. It's like, you know what, I am tired of just using this one way, this one strategy, this one coping skill, because it's no longer working. So I would say, please reach out. Please have a better understanding of what you're actually dealing with, and if you see that there's a pattern that's just destructive or not working, I would say reach out, speak with someone that you have some type of relationship with, and just share it. And I would hope that they would say, talk to someone that's a professional.
Do you think like your male clients are so ready at the point where they meet you because they've exhausted all options? Like, I have a hard time imagining, just because of what we've talked about, a male who's been conditioned a certain way, hasn't exhausted all options. Like, have you ever had somebody walk in and say, I immediately thought therapy was my number one option? Probably not, right?
No. But somehow either they're coming because they've realized it, or they may be in a relationship and their partner is saying it ain't working.
I mean, I had my sisters were the ones that recommended it for me.
Family members, people at work. Maybe you have an EAP at your job, employment assistance program, that they're saying, you know what, in order for you to make some changes, we need for you to use the services through our EAP, for you to seek out counseling. Now, this is what I would say too, especially for our guys. I try to explain counseling and therapy is one and the same, but I also try to explain it that's a little different. So I'll say counseling is like for anything else that you're trying to get stronger in. You're looking at where you are, and you're looking at where you're trying to get to. Steps and goals and how you achieve that. But if you find that as you're moving forward, and there seems to be like a glitch in the system where like I just can't make that next step, I can't make that next move, there's something that's stopping me, there's something that is preventing me, and I'm not sure what it is. And if they're speaking with me one-on-one in my office, or if we're doing our walk and talk therapy, where we begin to talk about, well, it seems like you want to move forward, but you're having this concern. When was the first time you've experienced that? And oftentimes they can kind of go back to it. Once they get in tune with those feelings about what it is, they can go back to that. And maybe it is high school, maybe it is grade school. And if we go back to start from where they had those concerns, and then we can begin to identify, understand from now looking at it from an adult perspective, rather than being still that child dealing with it. Now we can begin to bridge the gap between where they are and where they were and how we move forward. Now, that's therapy, because you have to go back to identify what the real concerns
So
were.
counseling is more like coaching.
Counseling is more where you are now and where you're trying to get to, identify, adjust,
How you're going to get there.
and how you're going to get there. That's how
If there's a block in the road, that's when it becomes a little bit more therapeutic.
Yes, that's how I present it to most clients, definitely men, because the stigma,
Like a deeper rooted block, not just something surface level.
Right.
But so we can go ahead if you want to ask
One last one is just, do you also notice, and maybe with your clients that are beyond, but there's a bit of follow the leader, such that like once one friend from the friend group goes and gets it, they come back to the crowd and they say, hey, I got it. Because like that's kind of how men are with my experience in my social circles. Like if one person does it, well now, we can all do it. And so, they kind of set that standard in some ways. Like, does that word of mouth trickle in that fashion? Have you seen
It's got to be the biggest referral base for you.
It does. I find a lot of, I have male and female, but I definitely find from my male clients that, they heard it from the friend, and they're like, man, he looks so much different. Talking to a prospective client who the client I've already met with. He said, yeah, he looks so much different. He sounded like this, and he doesn't look as down. What did you do? You know. And again, it is a process. There is no magic going on here. But you're right, that is a spark. Sometimes conducted men's support groups, and those are really, really powerful, extremely powerful, because they get the chance to, they have the opportunity to synergize off of each other's thoughts and feelings. You know, it's much like being in a sport, it's much like being on a team, and everyone is there to support as we're moving forward. So I think that's another opportunity for men to probably start off in a group, and then they can wean out to, you know what, I want to work on this specifically with someone that I can begin to establish trust.
Yeah, and that first person of the group's a leader, right? And that's what generates that followership.
Yeah.
I mean, I can speak personally. I've had a handful of people reach out about my therapist, just from this show. Like they don't even, you know, like it's me just talking about the fact that I'm going to therapy, and for whatever reason, because I am, and maybe they know me through a friend of a friend of a friend, they want my therapist. And so I've had a handful. So I did the word of mouth. Yeah, totally.
That's a form of leadership. Like, you've been a leader. You've been a leader to our network, to people that have listened to our podcast. Like, when people have a hesitancy to go, but they hold you in a high regard, and you go, and you knock down that vulnerability, or you're vulnerable, you generate that followership without even trying.
Which is great. I mean, that's one of the reasons we started the show. Glenn, thank you so much. We're going to do rapid fire questions now. So we got 3 of them to kind of answer off improv style. Not improv style, but top of the head. First thing that comes to the mind.
Okay.
All right. First question. Best piece of advice you've ever received, or just like a favorite quote?
Best piece of advice I've received is believe in yourself. And I know that sounds very, very vague, but believe in yourself. And I've been able to realize what that really means now. Taking your deepest pain and being able to change that into your biggest strength. That's been something that
I mean,
empowerment.
I was going to say that's what came to my head too. Empowerment, doing public speaking classes, taking improv. I mean, those are tough. Okay, second question. If you could go to dinner with anyone in the world, dead or alive, who would it be?
I heard that on your other podcast. I was like, well, who could I find? What? I mean, you know, gosh, that is such an interesting question. I would say Denzel Washington.
Why?
I like Denzel Washington because he's able to really, you know, if you've heard any of his, he's been in a lot of interviews, and he's just really just a deep thinker. He too came through some adversities, especially around education, where he went off to college and he just didn't know where and what he wanted to do, and being able to realize, you know, there's things that we're good at, and that's nice, but there's maybe that one thing that we're passionate about, and I think that that's what he really talked about, and that's really what really resonated with me. Do the things that you feel passionate about, and everything else, it won't be a job. It'll be something that's really enjoyable.
I can relate to that. I'm going through that right now. Lastly, just like hobbies, what do you like to do free time?
You know, man, I like to work out still, but I really enjoy walking, which is my passion, which is why I created that walk and talk therapy.
Where can people find? So AdvancePotential.com, is that right?
www.AdvancePotential, ADVANCE potential.com.
AdvancePotential.com. So again, thank you guys for listening. Glenn, thanks so much, man, for having this conversation.
Yes, sir.
Really enjoyed it.
Appreciate it.
We're going to sign off here. Thanks, y'all.